so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is like outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of this big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west of you're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities? It's hard to know. So people really just take you at face value, and they have to trust that, like, oh, other people are invested, so I guess I'll jump in too.
And that's why the celebrities are important. And that's why
it's a huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part. Yes, because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I too am safe because Tom Brady's got his money there. So I can put my money
So is
there.
the lure is like how Bitcoin used to be worth very little, and then one time it was with the high of Bitcoin, it was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that one guy who lost a hard drive and who's paying people to go through a landfill to try to find his hard drive because there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on that hard drive.
Yeah, people lose their crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But a lot of people found out about crypto the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the most fair case you could make about crypto is sometimes national currencies aren't a great idea and you want an alternative. So look at the Turkish lira, right? The inflation rate, I think, is like 75% or something like that. It's an unimaginable, it's just out of control inflation. And if you hold on to your Turkish lira, you're in for a bad time because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want to store your money somewhere else, how do you store it? So there's this idea of these alternative currencies that are kind of interesting. And then there's some arguments that hey, if you're someone like me, I have 2 employees and both of them are overseas. One of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them and, I have to do this wire transfer and it's kind of expensive to do these, you pay all these fees for wire transfers. So the idea is okay, well, if you have crypto, those wire fees can go down. And instead of taking, maybe a day or something, it'll take 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that there's nothing here. But the problem is that with the lack of regulation and the ability to send peer-to-peer, which means you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman, there's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams, and basically shell games where you're hiding the money. Yeah. You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later, but you actually own a bunch of that token. Then you sell it off and then the price plummets. So you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. There's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative money system. Especially in our modern age, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from, the average person. They're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just you went from the arms of one huckster to another. It's almost to something worse. There are reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety, it's for your safety. It's they need to, fight. One of the best ways to fight crime is at their wallets, take away their banking. And crypto has just really revitalized that because, now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank, now I can just send you $100K. It's going to take me 5 minutes.
So that's why when people kidnap people's data and things along those lines. They'd like to get paid through crypto.
Ransomware, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. Because before, it was like, okay, you need to use like Western Union or sort of one of these places where you can kind of send money without too much scrutiny. But even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit, like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no middleman, because there's no one who controls like Bitcoin, like no one can say like no to a transaction. Now it's like there's nothing to stop you from sending that money, and then you can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this like fancy language for a way to like anonymize your transaction. Like you put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does it work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cash. They've recently been shut down, but the idea of
just the idea of putting your money into Tornado Cash.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is there a better analogy for losing your house?
You know what's funny? Yeah.
You know, I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So like, let's say I put like let's say I have Ethereum, one Ether into this mixer, right? This pool of money. A bunch of people are putting one Ethereum into this thing. So all this money's going in, and then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time you withdraw, there's nothing tying your Ethereum to your particular address to like this random external address because you send it to a different one. So before, it's like if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's like here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1, and then you're sending $1 to all these other wallets, that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's like it's crazy. It's a crazy idea that these basically nerds in cryptography thought of, which is it's brilliant. I mean, it is brilliant because it is basically it's almost impossible to trace. But ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me. I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me $10 million, or your data's lost forever. And you're like, call the police, and you go, hey, track this guy, and they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet? To a Ethereum wallet? What are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.